I know why you ain't back. I know why you can't go to other networks. And the sad part about it is because it's all because of that stink-ass attitude. Evil. You pray for my downfall? First of all, congratulations. Because I didn't know you prayed. Did you tell them what happened, Michelle? Did you tell them that once you learned the news, you went Hollywood Reporter, it's embarrassing, and all of this other stuff? Did you tell them all of that?
The internet was already buzzing, but nothing could have prepared fans for the storm that exploded when Stephen A. Smith finally broke his silence. For weeks, Michelle Beadle had been out here throwing shade, claiming she was preying on his downfall like it was some kind of sport. And the moment that clip went viral, you could feel the shift in energy. Because when you come for Stephen A., you better be ready for him to come back swinging. At first, Stephen A. stayed quiet. He let the noise roll, the tweets stack, the YouTube reactions multiply. But when that clip of Michelle Beadle resurfaced, her laughing, her mocking, her saying that his entire empire was built on ego and luck, something inside Stephen A. snapped. This wasn't just another critic talking. This was a former colleague, someone who once sat under the same ESPN lights, now praying for him to fail. And Stephen A. doesn't take betrayal lightly. So when he hit that podcast mic, it wasn't just another segment, it was a reckoning. You could hear the anger in his voice, but also something deeper, a mix of disappointment, pride, and a sharp reminder that not everyone survives a grind the way he did. He started calmly, but the more he spoke, the more personal it became. You preying on my downfall, he said, his voice cutting through the mic like a blade. First of all, congratulations. I didn't even know you prayed. That line set the internet on fire. Stephen A. Smith wasn't just clapping back, he was exposing her. One story at a time, one receipt after another. He dragged up the memories, the whispers that had followed Michelle Beadle ever since she walked off the ESPN set. The times she reportedly refused to share the desk with him. The moments when breaking news got shelved, just because she didn't want his name attached to her segment. He wasn't speculating, he was remembering. You refused to share the desk, he said. You stopped breaking stories because of me. Tell me, did the producers feel that was professional? Did Mike Greenberg agree? Did ESPN agree? See, I'm still here. You're not. The tension was electric. Fans knew this wasn't some petty squabble. This was history being dragged into the light. For years, people had whispered about why Michelle Beadle left ESPN, why she bounced from network to network, NBC, SiriusXM, FanDuel, and yet somehow never found her footing again. But Stephen A. wasn't whispering. He was shouting, "Why you gone, Michelle?" He pressed, "Why you can't go back? Why nobody calling you?" I'll tell you why. It's that stink attitude. That evil spirit. That's what killed your career. Every line felt like a punch. And yet, Stephen A. didn't sound angry for himself, he sounded offended for the craft, for the hustle, for every hour he spent working while she, as he put it, was getting paid for not working. You took that buyout money and lived off it, he said. You didn't give it back. You got paid for years without working, and you want to talk about me? I work for mine. Every single check I earn is for hours I put in. It was brutal, raw, and unapologetic for the first time. Fans saw a different side of Stephen A., not the loud ESPN debater, but the man behind the microphone who had fought to stay relevant in an industry built to chew people up. To him, Michelle Beadle wasn't just attacking his name, she was mocking the grind itself. And when he said, "I know why you're gone. I know why you ain't back. I know why you can't go to other networks," it didn't sound like gossip, it sounded like gospel. He even pulled in Norby Williamson, the ESPN executive who'd once been both their boss. "Your boss now, Michelle? I know him. I know exactly how that went down." Every mention was deliberate. Every name drop was a scalpel. Fans watching the podcast replay could feel that this wasn't just entertainment, it was payback. Years of quiet disrespect boiling over into a single, unfiltered monologue. And yet, even as he tore into her, Stephen A. stayed calculated. He ended the rant by saying he had no interest in ever talking about her again. But it was too late, the internet had already crowned him the winner. Memes exploded. Clips circulated. Viewers flooded his comment sections with fire emojis, and she asked for reactions. But behind the laughter, behind the views, there was something darker. Because this wasn't just a battle of personalities, it was a collision of legacies. Stephen A. represented consistency, survival, power built from reputation. Michelle Beadle represented resentment, rebellion. And what happens when the machine spits you out? He said she blamed everyone: LeBron James, Rachel Nichols, the audience, even the producers, but never herself. That was the dagger, the part that hit harder than anything else. Because deep down, fans knew that story. They'd seen it before. The star who couldn't handle the fall. The critic who used bitterness as content. And yet, while the world replayed Stephen A.'s firestorm, the question remained, would Michelle Beadle respond? Would she double down? Or finally admit that the downfall she prayed for never came? Because Stephen A. Smith wasn't just standing tall, he was reminding everyone that in the world of sports media, loyalty and hustle always win. When Stephen A. Smith dropped the final line, "I don't ever want to talk about this woman again," everyone knew that wasn't the end. Because in the digital age, silence doesn't mean peace. It means something bigger is coming. And if there's one thing the internet loves more than a feud, it's the fallout that follows. After Stephen A.'s explosive podcast episode aired, the clip spread like wildfire. Fans uploaded reaction videos, podcasts spliced his rants into TikToks, and sports pages across Instagram began looping the part where he said, "You got paid for not working." That line alone became a meme. A quote and a warning shot all at once. Michelle Beadle, who once held one of ESPN's most prestigious chairs, suddenly found herself trending for all the wrong reasons. People weren't talking about her new ventures or her podcast anymore. They were dissecting her downfall. The same networks she had once walked away from were now broadcasting the story of how Stephen A. Smith had ended her career twice, first quietly, now publicly. In those 30 minutes of fury, Stephen A. Smith had done something few people could. He turned years of whispers into a full-blown industry expose. He didn't just defend himself, he took control of the narrative for Stephen A. This wasn't about clout, it was about principle. He had spent decades building his reputation from the ground up: radio, print, television, late-night appearances, endless debate tables. He had weathered controversies, firings, comebacks, and criticism that would have broken most anchors. And through it all, one thing never changed: his work ethic. To him, Michelle Beadle's attitude represented everything he stood against: entitlement, ego, and an earned resentment. When he said, "I work for mine," that wasn't just a defense, it was a declaration. It was the motto of a man who built himself in front of the camera and refused to let anyone rewrite his story. But what made this moment even more gripping was how personal it became. Stephen A. wasn't simply attacking Michelle's credibility, he was exposing the cracks in the very system they've both been part of. "See, I know the bosses. I know how this game works," he said. "And I also know why you ain't getting them calls no more." Those words hit like thunder. Because behind the glamour of ESPN, FanDuel, and NBC lies a truth every broadcaster knows. Reputation is currency. An attitude can bankrupt you faster than ratings ever will. And when Stephen A. name-dropped Norby Williamson, the ESPN executive who had once overseen both their careers, fans realized this wasn't speculation, it was confirmation. This was an insider speaking with receipts. Meanwhile, in comment sections across the internet, people were taking sides. Some rallied behind Stephen A., saying, "He earned everything he's got." She's bitter. Others defended Michelle Beadle, arguing that she had every right to call out hypocrisy in a male-dominated sports culture. The conversation became bigger than just a personalities, it became a referendum on power, gender, and respect in the sports media world. But what made the story even wilder was what came next. According to insiders, Michelle Beadle didn't take the rant lightly. Behind the scenes, she reportedly reached out to close friends and former colleagues, venting that Stephen A. had crossed a line. Some claimed she planned to address it on her own podcast. Others said she'd rather let it die down. But fans weren't waiting, they wanted a response, and they wanted it now. And as the days went on, Stephen A. doubled down without even mentioning her name again. Instead, he leaned into the power of silence and presence. He kept doing what he always did: hosting, debating, showing up on every screen, proving that no amount of gossip could derail his empire. That's when the symbolism became clear. Stephen A. Smith didn't just win the argument, he owned the moment. Because in the end, success is the loudest form of revenge. While Michelle Beadle's voice grew quieter, Stephen A.'s reach only expanded. Every headline, every clip, every upload reminded the world who was still standing in the center of the spotlight. But the deeper message went far beyond ESPN or personal grudges. Stephen A. had touched on something universal: the line between ambition and bitterness. He made it clear that no matter how talented you are, if you burn bridges, the industry will remember. And when he said, "You blamed LeBron James, you blamed Rachel Nichols, you blamed the audience, but you never blamed yourself," it wasn't just about Michelle. It was a warning to everyone watching. In that moment, Stephen A. Smith became more than a commentator, he became a case study in longevity. The man who survived cancellations, co-host changes, and corporate shakeups was now reminding the next generation that success doesn't just come from talent, it comes from accountability. By the time the rant reached its final minute, Stephen A. looked exhausted but certain. "Enough's enough," he said, his voice softening. I've stayed quiet for years, but I had to speak this one time. And now, I'm done. But even as he signed off, the war he ignited was just beginning. Clips of Beadle's old interviews resurfaced. Articles she'd done years ago about workplace culture started circulating again. Every fan, every analyst, every YouTuber began dissecting the feud like it was a championship replay. And with each replay, Stephen A.'s narrative kept winning. Because whether people loved him or hated him, they couldn't deny one thing: he was still relevant, still booked, and still the face of sports talk. Meanwhile, for Michelle Beadle, the silence spoke volumes. The downfall she prayed for never came. The empire she mocked only grew stronger. And the man she once dismissed as overworked and overrated had once again proven that consistency outlives criticism. At the end of the day, Stephen A. Smith didn't just check Michelle Beadle, he reminded the entire industry that longevity is the ultimate clapback. Because while others quit, he kept talking. While others cashed out, he kept earning. And while others prayed for downfalls, Stephen A. Smith built legacies. That's why, when fans look back on this feud, they won't remember it as just gossip, they'll remember it as a day the king of sports media reminded the world exactly why he's still on top. And as a final echo of that rant fades away, one truth remains unshaken: Stephen A. Smith doesn't need anyone to believe in him, because he's already done the work.